Okay, so I want to start out by going over some of the powerful setups. That was one of the last things that John did a webinar on as far as the systems go. And if you go to the Power Plays section, you can, it's going to have, it has most of the links that you need in here. And after open house, I'm going to add, oh, there we go, that's what we need. I'm going to add a whole bunch of links for about anything you could need will be down here, so you'll have it all in one place. So the powerful setups is what I really want to look. I had said before that you should start by learning the power plays and then go to the powerful setups if you wanted more plays, but I've kind of changed my mind on that. And the reason is these powerful setups, they have less subjectivity. They're much more objective. They have definite 1, 2, 3s, and just if it's there, you take it. If not, you can look around and see, for example, if it's going into settlement, it's not a particularly good idea, and that kind of thing. But the power slings, I was kind of looking for a specific one. The absolute best slings you can find are when you just had a power play, and it comes down and you've got, I don't know if you can see this very well, but it's got a cluster on the sling bar that's going through the recent swing point that just took place from the power play. That's your absolute best, one of your absolute best setups. And I encourage you guys to take that every time, just about. I don't hardly miss them. You want the cluster, you can see it kind of in there, to be on the correct side of the swing line. What does that mean? It means if you're going short, you want the cluster to be below the swing line. If you were going long, just pretend for a minute this bar was going up and going through, you would want the cluster to be above the swing point. And this is not an example. It's just, this is not a power sling, because it had two bars going the wrong direction before it. So this was not, just because it touched back to this swing point does not make it a power sling. You need it to be going through, preferably the body of the bar going through the swing level. In this case, it was the wick that was going through. But the more important thing is that the cluster is on the correct side of the swing level, which if you're going short, you want it to be below the swing level. Does that make sense? Okay, getting a little bit of response there. If it's just a swing level, like for example this bar down here, and the blue ice is not a swing level. You have to have a level that was actually a swing point at one point, and a big level does not necessarily, it may be also a swing level, but just because it's a big level does not mean it's a power sling. But for a moment, pretend that it is, and you can see this cluster is pretty much right on the line, and I'm not crazy about that, but the thing that that would throw me in the direction of wanting to take this trade is that you had a mini magnet coming off it. A mini magnet makes everything look better. And if this was like an old swing line, and it probably is because I can see a power line right here, that means there was a swing point at some point right there. So that means that this really was a swing point, but it's old. So you really want that cluster on the bottom side of it, since you're going short, and it was not. There's a mini magnet here, and that would give me a little more confidence to want to take that. If the cluster is just touching the swing line or on the swing line and not quite on the right side of it, the mini magnet helps really well. If it didn't have a mini magnet, I wouldn't probably want to be taking it. It's really too close for me. I want the best setups. So those are the absolute best power slings you can find. This is another power sling here. You can see these old lines here, the old dots, and if you continue them, it's going right through, but what do you have here? It's on the wrong side. So that's probably not one that I would take. It worked out in this case, but I probably wouldn't want to take that one because it's on the wrong side. The other point is it's going through the body of the bar, so I don't know. But personally, I'm not crazy about it. You had all these stars, meaning you have some momentum going down, but you're barreling, you're going through those green ice and the blue ice, and after the fact we can see, yep, it went down great, but I'm not sure I would have wanted to take that. If it had a mini magnet, yep, it's close enough to the line that probably would have threw me in the, would have made me lean more toward taking it, since it's so close to this, to the level. Does that make sense? Any questions on this so far? Those are the best swing power slings. Ugh, gosh, it's hard to say, these tongue twisters. These are the best power slings that there are. The most powerful are the ones that were right after a reversal and you had this little swing level. Look for these ones. They're great. More whiskey. I wish. At this point, I think I could use it. Okay, so I'm going to go back and go over. That's the best power slings to take, is when they're that first sling right after the reversal, and the cluster is on the correct side. Okay, so we got the power slings. Then we have these apex pattern P's, a power P. And these I found to be absolutely fabulous. Also, you have the cluster. It doesn't matter where on the bar the cluster is, as long as it's on a reversal bar. You have a apex pattern P, and as we saw today, it's really better if the MVP line matches the power, or what matches the P. Those are going to be your best ones. If the power line does, if the MVP line does not, it's not green, the same color as the P is green, the MVP line's green, that's really going to be probably a highly, the chances of that profiting are very high. You have, and you also had a mini magnet on this one, which is just great. So we've got the P, we've got a cluster, must have clusters. In this one we had a mini magnet, and the E and the MVP line match, and you have an X from the order prints. That's one, if I catch that, I'm going to load up contracts on that one and go ahead and go on up. The entry is 1 to 3 ticks up. These are the setups that, as mentor groups, I'm going to go over these, and I'm going to push these ones first, because you don't have to think about these. You don't have to wonder, well, is it a 1? Is it a 2? Is it a 3? I don't know. You can see you got a green power P, or apex P, a green MVP, even the green X. You had I mean, this is just an amazing setup here. And so that's, you don't have to think about it and wonder about it. It needs a level also, yes, and you had your thank you for pointing that out. It has a level just underneath it. When you're on in a long trend, you're bouncing off a level. And so that is you need your level also. So there's not much to think about with these. So they're not as subjective, and the rate of profit on them is very, very high. So I'm thinking these are probably a better trade for a newbie to take, because you don't have to wonder. While you're taking these, study the power plays, think about them, learn them, mark them up, practice them, and you've got something to work on while you're taking those. Any questions on that? Yeah, my birds want to get in the, I'm sure you hear them. They love when I do THTs. Okay, and then we go down and we have a power X. It's kind of confusing because it's so close to a power P, and the best are when you have a P and an X. But if you have an X, now this is from order prints, this is not an apex pattern X, but the X from the order prints. And if you have a mini magnet, that's even better. And you have to have a cluster. You have a level, which in this case is the open and the high of the day. If you have a lot of, say for example, you had a bunch of mini magnets up here and maybe several swing levels, that if you have a bunch of levels up here and maybe some I zones if you have those on your chart, that is pretty much the same thing as a level on these type of plays. You don't have to have a huge level. It can be a little bit of a smaller level, but if you have a small level, you want a couple of them. You want to have some good resistance up there. But you've got your X, and in this case you had a mini magnet, which always adds extra confidence when I take a trade. And you have to have a cluster. And you've got several levels up here and then down. And in this case, we didn't have, here's the swing that I like to see, but we did not have a swing, a cluster on this bar, so we didn't have a secondary entry. A lot of times you're going to see a secondary entry here. And these are great. If you miss this one, grab this one. But in this case, we did not have a cluster, so this would not be a power sling. But you'll notice there was a sling going through this swing level. There almost always will be a sling here. Once in a while, not, but most of the time, yes. So if you look back up here, you had to break out a chop. It came down, retraced a little bit, and came back down. That really was your power play. I guess your cluster was way back here, which I would rather see a cluster up here. But when you have this tight of chop for this long, they're really building a lot of, it looks like maybe we had one right here. They're actually building a lot of contracts here, gathering contracts. And so you maybe won't see as many in here, as many clusters. You have to see at least one to take it as a chop breakout. But they have more time to kind of hide their orders and do smaller, a lot more smaller ones that won't be detected by the clusters. So when you have more chop, more tighter chop, you got a lot of that. And that's really, really, that's a good thing. You like a lot of tight chop. I mean, that's saying it's gearing up to make a big move. Now, you know, it made its breakout, came back down, and anybody that pulled their stops down to break even, well, they got stopped out here. And that you're almost always going to, on a big move, you're going to have a pullback. And this wasn't a really big move, but yeah, I'll take that many ticks. That's not bad. So, Randall says those are harder for him to trying to determine direction because they're usually shoot in the direction fast. That is, it's true. I mean, it's kind of hard. The other thing to look at is you can, this isn't a really good screenshot to show that. You can kind of look at the VAD E and see if it matches when it's breaking out. And if it matches, there's a better chance that it's going to be a good breakout. But that's another trick that I wanted to go over. When you're doing, let me go back to the power plays. John's going to do a webinar on VAD E's. Let's see. Coming up and giving you a lot more. Okay. These are some kind of good examples here. If you look at this, it's pointing out a number 1 power play. Okay, where you had the price went a little higher. Look at your VAD. It changed. VAD E. Sorry, I have to clarify that. Look at VAD E. It changed. So sometimes you wonder, there was a trend coming down here. Is that a 1 or is that a 3? In this case, you don't have to wonder too much if it's a 3, but it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. So here's a little rule of thumb. It's not every time. It's not a rule because it doesn't happen every time. But if your VAD E has changed, it's a better chance it's a 1 or a 2. Okay, let's just look at a couple of these. Here you're coming up, you're going up. VAD E changed. That's not HD. Look here. We had HD, it looks like. Yeah, don't fall into this trap. It wasn't a 1 or a 2. And look at VAD E. It stayed the same the whole time. So if you had a trade, you would be looking at HD number 3. And on this one, this is a number 2 setup. Just glance at the VAD E. It's changed a lot. So you might wonder, we have kind of a downtrend and then we retraced. Are we looking for, what are we looking for? Well, glance at your VAD E. It changed a bunch. You're looking for a 1 or a 2 there. Okay, and this one, you're looking at, again, a number 2. So it's chopping and chopping, and so you're wondering, you really aren't wondering in this one, but anyway, you glance at the E and you can see, yep, it's colorful. Well, that's a 1 or a 2. Okay. Here we are. It's kind of harder to see. Okay. You're in an uptrend. You're looking for hidden divergence. But you're kind of seeing this, and maybe your chart is zoomed in a little closer and you can't see the whole thing, and you're wondering, okay, are we looking at 1 or 2 or 3? We went a little higher. Look at your VAD E. It didn't change. We're looking for hidden divergence. And okay, now we're down to 4. But and the same thing with this. You're wondering, is this maybe it didn't go as far on more VAD, so is it maybe a number 1 or number 2? I'm sorry, is this maybe a number 2? And you don't know, is it hidden divergence? Is it number 2? Look at your E. It stayed the same. To that point, we had one little bar that changed, and this was right as this bar was forming, so you wouldn't even see that one yet. But to that point, your VAD stayed the same. You're looking for HD. Does that make sense? Or am I talking to myself? Somewhat. Okay. How can I explain it? How can I reword it, make it any clearer? If you're unsure of if it's a 1, a 2, or a 3, look down at your VAD E. If it's flipped around a bunch, you're probably looking for a 1 or a 2. If it stayed the same color, you're probably looking for a 3. Now the one thing is, if you've got quite a large trend and a large retrace and you're still really in a good trend, sometimes the HD will flip. But almost never will it not flip for 1 or 2. Your E is going to at least turn cyan or orange. Okay, just a little tip that John noticed when we were going over some of these charts. So it should be pretty obvious with the large trend. Yeah, it usually is. But sometimes the large trends have like it started up here. Well, this is a pretty large pullback. So are you looking for, you know, a 1 or a 2? Well, it would be a 2 because it didn't go as far on more. Technically, that could be hidden divergence because you were starting a trend, but it wasn't evident yet, so you really didn't know that. So in this case, whether you classified it as a number 2, that it went further on, or it went not as far on more VAD, or you classified it as a HD, assuming that you had a little more of an uptrend way over here. If you want to classify it for an HD, that this time the pullback was higher. The thing that, if you're confused, the thing is, both of those setups told you to go down. So if they both agree, it doesn't really matter which one it was. As long as both types of setups agree and they tell you to go the same way, it doesn't matter. You know, read it, look at what it would read both directions, and if they conflict, maybe it's time to stay out. But if they both agree, then yeah, I'm going to be more likely to take that trade. Does that make sense? And seem pretty clear? Okay, then one other thing that I wanted to go over was a chop box within a chop box. Let me see. Today it's really been choppy and yucky, so I should be able to find something here, right? Here's our big, come on, draw for me. Here's our big chop box. Okay. And here is our smaller chop box. Okay, well, let's move this over to here. Let's just say that a little bit smaller chop box. Let's say you've got a chop box within a chop box. And you are looking at, okay, you had your cluster. Okay, this bar is forming, okay, and you see your cluster form. And you know clusters don't go away. They might move, but they don't go away. So you've got your cluster. And you've got your chop box and, you know, your swing level, and you're thinking, yeah, I've got a trade here. But do you really have time to profit, room to profit before you hit the bottom of this larger chop box? Heck no. You do not have room for that to profit before here. So you would not want to take that trade. If your chop box was up here, say right here, okay, and just let's pretend like it was coming down. Let's just say you had a cluster here, and so you're thinking, it's going to break out. Now, do you have room to profit between here and here? Yeah, you've got a little room. 85 down to 80. You've got about 20 ticks there. So you've got room to profit between way up here and down here. It's a scalp, but at least, I mean, you would protect your profit. It might break on out. So that one would be better, a more likelihood that I would take, because at least you're going to have your scalp if it doesn't break out, and you've got a chance that it could break out there. Does that make sense on if you don't know if you've got a smaller chop box within a larger one, If you want to know whether you should take the breakout of the smaller box or should I take the breakout of the bigger box, geez, I don't know what to do. Up here, if it's breaking out on top, you don't want to take a breakout on top. You don't have room to profit before it hits its head on this one. So you don't take the breakout of this little one, you would take the breakout of the big one. And that's where you go up and out. This one, you could take the breakout of the small one. You get a head start on the breakout. Maybe it'll break out of this and maybe it won't, but at least you've got a scalp here between the two boxes. Does that make sense? And give you a little bit of a hint on, if you've got a tighter chop within a bigger chop. And today, look, your tighter chop was just big enough that there was nothing good here. I mean, the whole morning, this just sucked. It was horrible. You couldn't take a trade going short because you're going to bump your head. I mean, you didn't really know that you had this chop box here, but you did have this swing line. And if you were drawing, like I had said at one point, this is the kind of market to draw a chop box around the market and wait until it moves out of the chop box. Well, look what happened when it finally moved out of the chop box. It came back to test it at settlement, which we would expect. And then what happened? You finally got a move when it went out of the chop box. That's what I'm talking about when I say put the market in timeout, leave it alone, don't touch it till it's ready to behave. And in here, yeah, you got a little, if you got out here, then you probably got kicked at settlement. Hopefully you were hiding behind settlement if you did try and take this one. But you didn't have a cluster at this point. So with such a huge long chop, I would want a cluster as I'm leaving. And you didn't get that here. For me, I wouldn't like this. And this, I probably wouldn't have taken had I been sitting here and seen it. I probably wouldn't have taken this either because we didn't have a cluster, we didn't have an E, we didn't have anything giving you an indication to get out. The only thing you had was, look at that, it laid down a mini magnet right there on settlement. But that's the only thing you had. It wouldn't have been a really, and then you're running into, and what happens when you run into these two old mini magnets? You had a little chop between the mini magnets and the green ice. See how that, I mean, the mini magnets are great when you learn to use them, and it's when you got a lot of them in one small area, that is an area of chop, and the actual lines that the mini magnets are on, the levels they are on, become less important. If there's a mini magnet out in the middle of nowhere, like up here, it's just all by itself, well, the market's likely going to come back up here eventually and hit that mini magnet again. But when you got a bunch, I see there's one here, there's a couple in here, hard to tell with these chop boxes, but now look at that. There's one here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one here. That's telling you it's just chopping. And what does it do? That's all it did all morning. So it really gives you a really good indication of what the market is going to do. It kind of, tells you a little story right there. Hey, we're going to chop a while. Go eat breakfast, relax, chill, come back later. And sure enough, a lot of times you'll get that 11:30-ish move. We didn't get that today. It was really not behaving at all. So then here you've got when the good move actually happened, it was about 1 o'clock. And I think Marilyn had said between 1 and 1:30 that, a lot of times you'll get that move. Sure enough, it'll move in the afternoon, and it's moving a little bit nicer.